On this playoff edition of Locked On Texans, I will be joined by B. Scott and Big Sarge as we preview the Houston Texans wild card matchup against the Cleveland Browns.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this, I can't believe I'm saying this, playoff edition preview of the Locked On Texans podcast. As always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on all your favorite social media platforms at CodyDavis_24. And joining me are Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610. Brian Belfield, you guys know him as Big Sarge. By the way, it's his birthday. Happy birthday, my brother. Another credential media member. There you go. Hey, 12 out here. 12 out here. Big Sarge, Texans beat reporter over at the Texans Wire and the host of the Big Sarge Sports Podcast with a Z at the end. What's going on, ladies? What's going on, guys? And let me just say, when we last did this, what was that, back in August, I want to say? It was right before the season started. I would have never imagined us getting together for a playoff edition of Locked On Texans. And not just any playoff edition, they're hosting the playoff game as well as AFC South Divisional Champs. What's going on, guys?
Man, Sarge, bro, like, I don't know about you, man, but I thought this was a 6-win team coming in. Now, there were points during the season where it started to trend upward, where we started to see signs from C.J. Stroud, where we started to see signs from this defense, kind of its bend but don't break nature, but also would make plays. You're like, wait a minute, they got a head coach, they got a quarterback, they got a defense that can keep them in a game. There might be, and then you look around, the AFC is not necessarily all that. I started to kind of have a feeling that they could do some things, but to tell you that I thought we would be sitting up here talking about we're going to be covering them hosting a playoff game, like, it's a remarkable turnaround, man. And happy birthday too, by the way, Big Sarge.
Hey, man, I appreciate that. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, B. Scott. Thank you for having me on Locked On Texans. And I'm just going to say this. Playoffs? I did that last week when I was at Lucas Oil Stadium in my post game, standing on the Colts field, because I was like, man, this just seems so like I should be doing this. Playoffs? No, Cody, I'm going to be honest with you. I did not look from the first day we were at OTAs, rookie minicamp, training camp, preseason. I still kept saying to myself, 6-7 wins, especially with what this franchise had been through the last 3 seasons. I did not see this instantaneous turnaround that the Houston Texans have done.
And on this playoff edition of Locked On Texans, we are going to talk about how far can the Houston Texans go. In the second segment, we're actually going to look at how health and injuries will once again play a key role in who will come out victorious in this wild card matchup. But Sarge, I'm going to start off with you first. When you take a look at this game, Texans, Browns, we already know the story, what took place on Christmas Eve, so we ain't really got to revisit that. But when you take a look at this playoff matchup, what is your top key to victory on Saturday?
Okay, so I know you want me to say C.J. Stroud. That's too easy.
Yeah, that's too easy. That's too easy. Thank you.
I know you want me to say this guy.
12, okay.
Nico Collins.
Okay.
That's too easy. I know you want me to say the return of Will Anderson Jr. and Jonathan Grenard. That's too easy.
Okay.
Do you know what the key to victory for the Houston Texans for me is? Penalties. In 9 games this season, they've had 60 or more penalty yards. 3 under 70, 3 over 70, 2 over 80, and 1 over 100. They've averaged 9 penalties. They averaged 9 penalties per game in that 9-game span. In the last game against the Browns, they had 10 penalties for 76 yards. So I'm not even worried about what the players are going to do on the field, I'm worried about them staying disciplined. I'm worried about, I don't want to see the false starts by the offensive lineman. I don't want to see the holding by the offensive. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't want to see the holding by the offensive lineman. I don't want to see jumping off sides by the defense because they're listening to the snap count and not the ball. I don't want to see pass interference. What I would like to see is a team that can stay disciplined and not put the game in jeopardy by having undisciplined moments with penalties. So that's my key to victory. As long as they can keep the penalties low, I feel like they can win this game.
B. Scott?
Man, so I know CJ Stroud is too easy. So let me go on a different version of saying the same thing. Nico Collins, I think, is the big difference maker here. If you go back to the previous Cleveland game, all right, and I know you didn't want to say Nico Collins, but you go back to the previous Cleveland game, what did Nico Collins not have going for him against the Browns the last time?
CJ Stroud.
He did not have CJ Stroud. And so I don't expect y'all tell me if y'all think I'm crazy. I know we're all three of us are really big Nico Collins fans, have been for a long time. Y'all tell me if y'all expect Nico Collins to go into this game and finish with 4 catches for 18 yards. I know he had a touchdown, but look, 4 catches for 18 yards, Nico Collins with CJ Stroud playing quarterback. I don't think so. I think you see a far different version of Nico Collins that's a lot more like the one that you've been seeing in recent weeks. Maybe something closer to the one like you saw in the playoff clincher at Indianapolis, which I know, Sarge, you were out there. You witnessed that firsthand. Maybe you see something like that, or something closer to like what Amari Cooper was against the Texans defense in that game against the Browns on Christmas Eve. But what I don't think you're going to see is a 4-catch, 18-yard performance from Nico Collins. And if I could really just point out the wide receiving core as a whole, because that's been a conversation piece. We've all been up there this week at the press conferences. It's been a conversation piece of at least a small one of, hey, what about the non-Nico Collins receiving threats and receiving targets? Can you expect to get more from them at some point? And it is a positive thing for the Texans that they plan on having their full complementary of, let's call it like experienced NFL wide receivers between Nico Collins, Robert Woods, and Noah Brown, who has practiced this week and I think is going to try to give it a go. So like if they have Nico Collins with CJ Stroud and their full complement of wide receivers, not to mention Dalton Schultz on top of that, I feel like we're talking about a completely different offense than the one that was inept for most of the game against the Browns. So yeah, maybe not just CJ Stroud, but the impact that it's going to have on the wide receivers and their playmaking ability. We've just seen the difference between like Nico Collins. I don't mean this disrespectfully, but Nico Collins, his first 2 years, even when healthy, when he showed some promise, Nico Collins with Davis Mills, Nico Collins with Case Keenum versus Nico Collins with CJ Stroud. It looks a lot different. So I'm expecting a big Nico game here.
Hey, real quick, B. Scott, one thing I wanted to say was the one thing that I really liked about what happened in that Browns game with Nico is, you all remember when he scored the touchdown? He just grabbed the ball, threw it to the stands. I like that. I like that because I've seen some wide receivers even in garbage time score, and next thing you know, they breaking out their celebration dance. And after the game, when I was talking to Nico was like, it wasn't nothing to celebrate. I didn't ask him why didn't he celebrate. I just said, hey man, you got the touchdown. You just threw the ball in the stand. He said, wasn't nothing to celebrate. We was losing. He said, and I ain't like the fact that we was losing. He said, I was still doing my job, but it wasn't anything to celebrate. And I like that attitude.
Really quick, to B. Scott, your point about the wide receivers, that's something, Sarge, you've been talking about all week. I've been talking about all week. A lot of us been talking about all week, because when you go back and you take a look at the game that Nico had last week against the Indianapolis Colts, $195, 9 catch. He went 9 for 9. We know that Nico is, if he isn't at the top, he is near the top of the Brown scouting report. And I've been saying it all week. I look at this wide receiving core, and I really don't know how much you can actually trust it. As of right now, Noah Brown and Robert Woods at the top of this recording, both of those guys are still questionable. But even if they are out there on the field, we don't know how much their injuries is going to hamper them. And then when you take a look at other guys like Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie, it's like we've been calling upon them to step it up the entire year. Now, whether it's their inabilities or not getting in the right opportunities or Bobby Slower just not using them right, they still haven't had that game. For me personally, the key to victory, and I know this is going to be hard against one of, if not the best defensive team in the league, they have to establish something in that run game because due to the fact that you don't know who's going to help Nico Collins at wide receiver. I think if you establish something in the run game, especially when Devin Singletary out there, that's actually going to allow Bobby Sloyd to open up the playbook a little bit more. That's going to give CJ Stroud more options. That's going to give the Houston Texans more options in general to attack Cleveland. When I take a look at the Houston Texans, when Devin Singletary had an opportunity to record 80 yards or more, they are 4-0. So they definitely need to make sure that they establish something in that rushing attack, because I think that is going to be one of the most important things that they need to do in order to get the victory on Saturday. Go ahead, B. Scott.
Yeah, let me say this. I do think, well, first of all, I agree with you. But I do think a reason why they didn't do that or weren't able to do that is because they fell behind so early. Like
that is a good point.
Like the defense gave up the game, and not to say that it was over, but it certainly felt over very early.
It was over,
and then it was over. And then eventually it got to the point where, like, think about it. Davis Mills came in there eventually and threw the ball 32 times. Like, I mean, and a lot of it in garbage time, I understand, but I'm just saying, like, they were playing from a disadvantage very early on. You look at it, the little bit of running that they did do, like I'm looking at it right now. They threw the ball between Davis and Case. They threw the ball 49 times. 49 times between those two guys and ran it 16. It was because they were getting blown out. I think, you look at them running at 16. Devin Singletary ran for almost 5 yards a carry. So it's not like they didn't see some success in running the ball. It's just that they couldn't really commit to it and establish it because they were down so early. So I think it'll be critical to obviously not give up the game early and be playing from a significant disadvantage early on in the game to where they can do exactly what you're talking about. Because I do think that they are best when they are balanced. Like when they're running the ball effectively, I mean, it's like CJ, I feel like is lights out. This passing game is lights out. When they're one-dimensional, it's like, all right, Ricky, go out there and be special. And let's say, all right, Nico, go out there and be special. It's like, nah, you need a balanced attack, especially against a Cleveland defense that I feel like can be had more so in the run game than in the pass game.
At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Job has created the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy that, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this playoff edition of Locked On Texans. I know we got B. Scott. We got Big Sarge here. The only reason why I'm not calling it the Wakanda Forever edition like I normally do, John not here. That's the only reason why. But continuing here with this playoff installment, we know when the Texans lost 36-22 a couple weeks ago, a lot of us, including myself, Big Sarge, B. Scott, everybody was saying, well, how much stock could you put into that loss due to the fact that the Texans were dealing with a lot of injuries, especially on the defensive side of the ball. here we are about 2-3 weeks removed from that game, and the Texans, they are getting a lot of their key players back. The Cleveland Browns, unfortunately, because I never want to see a team, be hampered with injuries and all that other stuff. They are dealing with injuries, especially considering that Denzel Ward went down with a knee injury, I think, during Thursday's practice, and his status at the time of this recording is still in question. So, B. Scott, I'm going to start off with you. What type of impact do you believe health is going to play in the Texans' ability to win this game?
Well, I think it's going to play a huge factor for the most part because you're going to have two of your best defensive players back that you didn't have. And I'm talking about Jonathan Grenard, who missed most of that game, if I'm not mistaken, and Blake Cashman, who I think is going to be really critical in whatever the Browns try to do over the middle with with the tight end. Obviously, like that's going to be like David Njoku is a mismatch or a matchup problem for basically anybody. So you want to have at the very least your best players out there to deal with it. He's going to make some plays, but I mean, to not have like if you didn't have Cashman, if you didn't have Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard there to provide some pressure, I think that would be significant. So the fact that they're getting Jonathan Grenard back after him missing some time, I think is going to make a tremendous difference. And man, I feel like Flacco, and this has been a point of contention for some people on like how real is this Flacco thing. I'm having a tough time, man, because every time I discount Flacco, he go out there and he do something, and it's like I'm like, man, Flacco is older than I am, and I'm like, yo, he should not, like, he's close. He's like D'Amico's age. Like, I'm pretty sure D'Amico, whenever he's answer a question, like, man, I used to, you know what I'm saying? I played back in the Flacco era, man.
He did. Matter of fact, didn't they play in one of those playoff matchups, if I'm not mistaken?
I'm trying to think if D'Amico would have still,
Because I want to say they played the Ravens. I want to say in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. Or
that would have been D'Amico's maybe last year or maybe first year in that might have been his first year in Philly, if I'm not mistaken. But
okay,
either way,
let me check.
But either way, that's the same era, and I'm like, man, how is this even possible? So I'm having to, in my analysis, this is just what I'm doing, just the logical process that I'm taking. I'm conceding that there might be more to this Flacco thing than I was willing to give it credit for in the beginning. Because all he's done is go out there and bust my tail. And we know he's boom or bust. He will make plays and he will give you plays to be made. That's just who he is. So, like, I like that for the Texans defense in terms of, like, hey, he's going to give you some opportunities on top of the fact that you got your pass rushers out there legitimately. But, man, I'm just like, oh, this offense might be in a situation where, hey, it's good that you got dudes like C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins who can fight fire with fire in case Flacco is in his bag, in case Amari. And I don't think Amari Cooper going to go for 200 plus. I don't think it's going to be all of that. But they can make plays, man. Like, they can make plays. Like, we see it too many times. They are playmakers. So I think having your guys healthy is going to be a huge part of it. But this is not going to be an easy game, even at closer to full strength.
Really quick, 2012 playoffs, the Baltimore Ravens, the year they won the Super Bowl, did defeat the Houston Texans 20-13. Coach D'Amico Ryans had 7 tackles. Oh my God, JJ Watt had 12 tackles or 2.5 sacks. But Coach D'Amico Ryans had 7 tackles in that game. Joe Flacco went 14 for 27 for 176 yards. So this could be a revenge game for Coach D'Amico Ryans. But B. Scott, I'm glad that you talked about Joe Flacco, because Sarge, you and I literally just talked about Joe Flacco on your YouTube channel. Please, guys, go check it out. Sarge, so I'm going to ask you the same question. How much can health play a factor in the Houston Texans coming out victorious? But along those same lines, how can health actually help the Texans contain Joe Flacco, who I said on your show just 24 hours ago that I've always considered Joe Flacco, especially at that time, one of the most underrated quarterbacks of his generation?
Well, seeing that I don't do a lot of work with the Houston Texans, and seeing that I don't do a lot of work on, TV or, sports, is sports radio 610, correct, B Scott?
That's it. That's the name.
Yeah, seeing that I don't do a lot of work over there, I don't have to be as politically correct
No.
as Brandon K. Scott, or as I like to call him, B. Scott from Hiram Clark.
Yes, sir.
I don't have to be that politically correct. Man, look, let me start out by saying this. Yes, Joe Flacco in his prime, in his heyday, was amazing, right? Joe Flacco, of course, he's been able to help keep the ship afloat for the Cleveland Browns. But Joe Flacco was also sitting on his butt at home begging somebody to call him. Joe Flacco couldn't even get a commentator job on television. Everybody's like, no, we're good. So Kevin Stefanski took a chance, brought him in, and he's been able to keep them afloat. But let's just call a spade a spade. You have Jonathan Grenard play 3 snaps in that last game. You have Will Anderson sitting out that last game due to injury. You have Blake Cashman sitting out that last game due to injury. You lose Jimmy Ward. He played 4 snaps. You lose Steven Nelson for a while. Then he has to come back in because number 37 can't stay on his feet. And he became a highlight. He became a highlight for Amari Cooper in that game. He became a meme in that game. So, yes, Joe Flacco looked like the old Baltimore Ravens Joe Flacco the last time he played the Houston Texans because they weren't fully healthy. There's no possible way that a 55-year-old man is going to be able to run away from Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard. There's no possible way that a 60-year-old old man is going to be able to manipulate the pocket and do what he did last game. B. Scott, there's no possible way a 70-year-old man is going to be able to recreate what he did the last time he was in NRG Stadium. Oh, wait, hold on. I ain't finished.
Don't say 80, please. Don't say 80.
There's no possible way that a 76-year-old man is going to test the AFC Defensive Player of the Month. B, we're not talking about 7 days. We're talking about 31 days. They took a look and said, my God, Derek Stingley is exactly who we thought he was coming out of LSU. So, no, Joe Flacco's too old to get away from those edge rushers. You have the AFC Defensive Player of the Year coming into the game healthy. Last but not least, right? Yes, Cody, you asked me about health. I got that. Yes, the health is going to play a factor in the game because you're getting a lot of your injured players back. Here's the real reason why an 85-year-old man won't be able to beat the Houston Texans on Saturday at NRG Stadium. There's no possible way anybody else can tell me that a DeMeco Ryans-led defense, seeing a quarterback for the second time, seeing the offensive scheme for the second time, the defensive coordinator who was an assistant first, then became defensive coordinator when he was with the San Francisco 49ers, the way that he had that defense in the top 5, and now what has he done? Come in and revitalize this defense to make them a whole lot better than what they was last year, especially in the run game, and they got better in the passing game. Now, he was still, mixing and matching, learning, adjusting to not having some of his players, but for the most part, he has a full complement of defensive players, and there's no possible way a man who can apply for AARP is going to beat DeMeco Ryans a second time around.
Hold on. I just wait a second, okay, man. Wait a second.
Okay.
Hold on a second.
Remember,
I just want to
politically correct.
No. I just on that point. I just want to point out how he just called me politically correct and just made a political advertisement for this Texans defense. like his whole take was a political advertisement for how good this Texans defense is going to be when it's fully healthy. Which
but it wasn't politically correct, though. I could have sounded like a politician.
No.
What I was doing was talking about a man who was going to go down in the Guinness Book of World Record as the oldest quarterback to play the game.
No, politicians come in different sounds and different forms and all kind of different things. But that that was more of a political ad for this Texans defense, which I actually, and I know I'm tongue in cheek here, but I actually endorsed the ad. You know, I like as somebody who is everything that you were saying. But I will say this though, in response to your point about Joe Flacco trying to recapture his old self at 137 years old. Okay, listen, man. It wasn't just the Texans defense that he did this against. Just a few days later, on Thursday night, I guess it was on one of them prime Amazon Prime games, he went out and did something similar against a Jets defense that, okay, and I just gave you all of my allegiances and just told you how much I love the Texans, DeMeco Ryans, everything, all of that, okay? I feel that way. But that Jets defense, overall as a team, ain't worth a damn. But that Jets defense is one of the very best in the league. Nobody knows that better than the Texans themselves.
B, can I jump in real quick?
I'm just saying. I want to point out Joe Flacco went out there and did it again. Not even a whole week later, he went out and did it again against a even better defense.
The Jets have a great defense. They have a terrible offense. So if you're going to get the opportunity to keep getting the ball back like they did here,
I feel you.
And the Houston Texans didn't get past the 50-yard line on offense until the second half of the game. Yeah. Like of course, if you're going to keep giving them the ball back, this time he ain't going to keep getting the ball back because you got CJ over there.
Yeah. Hey, look, I do think we all seem to agree, whether we talking about the offense or the defense, the grass is greener with CJ Stroud out there.
The NFL regular season has wrapped up, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, in your pockets. The app is super easy to use. There's many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this playoff installment of Locked On Texans. I'm not about to do the whole what's your prediction, give me the score of the game, because I think it's safe to say all three of us picked the Houston Texans to win, which means that they will be advancing to the divisional round of the playoffs. I know this next question depends on matchup. Given how crazy the weather around the country is about to be, given where they have to travel to next week. But when you take a look at this Texans team, Sarge, you said it perfectly to open up this show. You know, all three of us, John, other colleagues, man, we have literally been around this team. We basically seen the foundation of this team being set since I want to say it was February 1st, February 2nd, the day that they introduced Coach DeMeco Ryans as the head coach. Remember, he was hired at the end of the month last January. And from that very moment, we knew this team was going to be different. But what we didn't know was how special and how damn good this team was going to be this fast. Once again, I get it, understand it. It all depends on matchup, all depends on where they have to go moving forward once they get past the Cleveland Browns. But Sarge, I'll start with you to close this one off. How far do you think the Texans can go in the playoffs this year?
Well, it really depends on the matchup in the next round, like we said, in the divisional round. And unfortunately, with Pittsburgh not being fully capable to stop the Buffalo Bills, especially in Buffalo, they're dealing with a lot of injuries as well. I mean, losing TJ Watt is huge.
Which, by the way, shout out to them for making the playoffs. That's another shocker, by the way. Sorry to cut you off, but I just want to give kudos to them real quick.
So I don't see Pittsburgh beating Buffalo. So that means that, of course, they'll advance. And I do see Kansas City being able to handle that weather better than the Miami Dolphins, and especially the Miami Dolphins is another team coming into this playoff game with a bunch of injuries. And they may get Waddle back. I think they may get Mostert back. But if they can't run the ball effectively in that weather, then they're going to lose to Kansas City, which means that next week in the divisional round, it would be the Buffalo Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and then it'll be a rematch of the first game of the season between the Ravens and the Texans. And unfortunately, that's where that's where they pull. I don't know, Cody. I don't know if you ever rode the Metro. Me and B Scott have.
Oh yeah,
you put a little string.
And let me know your stop coming.
I'm getting off, and I don't see any possible way that the Houston Texans can beat the Baltimore Ravens.
B Scott, before closing, since I already asked Sarge how far can this team go in the playoffs, I think we can all agree that what he said is the most realistic thing that can happen. And I get it. Starting with Bobby Slowick, a lot of people have been saying, all we need is 4 more wins. I said it yesterday. You know what happened if they could get those 4 wins? I think everybody's going to be partying down here in the city of Houston. But B Scott, when you take a look at this team, everything that they accomplished in year 1, my question to you is, how far do you think this team can go moving forward beyond the 2023 season? Because now you're looking at possibly the strongest foundation of any quote unquote rebuilding team moving forward.
Well, I don't know. For me, that's what the fact that things change so quickly in the NFL, to me, makes this moment even more special. Because I can project and give you an answer. And I do think the window is I would give you the Joe Burrow answer that he gave in that press conference where he said the window is as long as my career. I think that's the proper answer for a franchise quarterback to give. The window is for as long as they have CJ Stroud. I truly believe that. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to have some down seasons, some down years, some years where injuries pile up. And look at the Bengals this year. Their window is as long as Joe Burrow is their quarterback, but Joe Burrow wasn't their quarterback for a lot of the year, right? So you got to account for that. I don't think you can take for granted that every year is just going to be a year where you have a chance to win the division, to compete for a Super Bowl. I think that's all the more reason why this moment in time is special, because you can't just say, I bet you in 2017 the Jacksonville Jaguars thought that they were on the come up too. And then we saw how that ended up going. It just did not happen. So yeah, man. But to your question, I do think that there's an opportunity here to build around a quarterback that's expensive. You've got money and you've got a quarterback who is relatively inexpensive because he's on a rookie deal. He's getting paid well because he's number 2 overall pick, but relatively inexpensive on a rookie deal. You can spend money on Jonathan Grenard. It's going to take some serious money to bring Jonathan Grenard back. But guess what? You got money. You can spend that money and bring Jonathan Grenard back. You can do. You don't have to be I can't afford to pay a high level pass rusher. Yes, you can. Dalton Schultz is probably going to require a bit of a raise, but you don't have to break the bank. You can pay Dalton Schultz, if you or be figuring out diligently figuring out how you're going to replace that type of production at tight end. It's got to be one or the other. You can't just not bring them back and then just be all right, you know what I mean? So you got to have a plan there, right? So to me, I like the position that they're in. This has been talked about in multiple places, but the position they're in to build a team around having money and having a quarterback, the most important position, locked in over the next few years at a reasonable clip. I think it's right there. And obviously, D'Amico Ryans, who we're all fans of.
I don't know about you guys once again, man, but this has been a shocker. But at the same time, this has been a very fun podcast, especially considering that the wind kept knocking out my power. So I've been nervous the whole time since we've been recording, but we made it through, thank God. But before we go, man, B Scott, Sarge, please tell the listeners where they can follow you at on all your social media platforms. Your word, Sarge, I apologize. I want to correct myself. It's Sports Talk with Big Sarge with a Z at the end. I don't know why I always want to say the Big Sarge Sports Podcast. Maybe that's a sign you should change the name, but I'm just saying. But B. Scott, Sarge, Sarge, starting with you, please say to listeners where they can follow all of your work and follow you on all the social media platforms.
You can subscribe to the Sports Talk with Big Sarge podcast, available wherever you get your podcast from. And follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Sarge Sports with the Z at the end. I'm also on Instagram with under the same name. Also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Big Sarge Media, and you can read all of my writings. My government name is Brian Bearfield, so don't go to Texans Wire USA Today looking for Big Sarge and say, "So we can't find none of your articles." Yeah, because like they got to print my real name. They got to put my real name under my articles over there. So make sure you're reading all that, all my articles over at Texans Wire USA Today. And real quickly before I go, thank you for having me on. B. Scott, you know it's always a pleasure to be on with you, man. Yeah. And thank you for the birthday wishes. And
hey, follow H-Town Hoops podcast that I do. Alex Spillane, we cover the Rockets on that. And of course, Cody Davis and Big Sarge doing some excellent Rockets work on top of that. In case y'all didn't know that, but follow the H-Town Hoops podcast. I'm on Sports Radio 610 at least twice a week, Wednesdays and Thursdays. Wednesdays at 4:40 on the drive. Thursdays is at 11 o'clock on In the Loop. So make sure y'all check that out and all that we're doing over there. And yeah, stuff like this, man. At Brandon K. Scott on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. And you can catch us whenever we having our Wakanda Light episode. We call this Wakanda. It's not Wakanda forever. This is Wakanda for now. This is the Wakanda for now episode.
Yeah, this is Wakanda for now because my co-host John Hickman wasn't on this show. But please follow my co-host John Hickman on all of your social media platforms at John_Hickman12. Please remember to follow me on all your social media platforms at Cody Davis _24. Once again, that's Cody COTY DAVIS _24. Why 24? Because Kobe Bryant is the GOAT. That's that man right over there. Right over there on Sarge, I think that's his left shoulder. I want to say you're right, so that's the reason why I picked the number 24. However, tomorrow it's going to stand for Darius Stingley because he also wears number 24. But please be sure to check out Locked On Texans throughout this playoff run, throughout the offseason, on all your favorite podcast streaming services and on YouTube. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.